Wanted to say thanks to Keith, Tim, and anybody else who kind of magically helped me to kind of be on the program here today. As Keith mentioned, my name is John Brzozowski. I'm from Comcast, and it's really my honor to be able to share with you some information about our deployment. So, one of the things I was telling Keith before we got started here is, everywhere we go, we talk about the work that we're doing. Different strokes for different folks, right? So, if anywhere along the way I'm boring you or putting you to sleep or it's something that you've already heard before, then by all means, interrupt, interject, help me change direction so you hear something interesting to you. I don't have to figure this out. Relocate over here so I can move the slides. I'll just get started. So our V6 program has been around since about 2005. So we're going on our 9th year now. Probably in the first several years, we didn't really have a lot to say. There was a lot of work that we were doing, behind the scenes, working with cable labs and our internal teams to kind of get ourselves ready. But the reason I mention that is just to give you a sense of exactly how long we've been thinking about V6 and what it could do for our business. It's been almost 10 years now. With the size of our network, the number of customers that we have, the number of devices and types of services that we offer, all the alternatives to the kind of impending, depletion of IPv4, V6 was really the one that we felt was the best for Comcast and our long-term growth. I'll spare you the gory details of 8+ years. Happy to have sidebar and kind of share with you stories. And Keith, by all means, you don't need to put me behind the screen and mask my voice. I'd be happy to share some of the carnage stories with you, face included and everything. We have plenty of them, right? And with any new technology, there's always lessons to be learned, right? But almost 10 years later, here we are. We are now over 25% of our customer base actively using V6. So this isn't 25% of our footprint that could do V6. It is 25% of our customer base that is actively provisioned with IPv6. And this isn't even the actual number of devices. These are basically individual customers. That rounds out to be about 22% of the devices are home routers. The bulk of those are provided by us to our customers. And 3% is our computers, like the ones that you're all using here, directly connect to a cable modem. That number in just 3 short years has basically flip-flopped dramatically. In the very beginning, we had basically 75% of our customers had individual computers connected to cable modems, which, in the grand scheme of things, was good for V6 adoption, but didn't really offer us a kind of an innovative path forward. And we'll hear more about some of those things that come here over the next couple of slides. At this stage of the game, over 75% of our footprint, of our broadband footprint, is able to utilize IPv6. So what does this really mean? For people who are running broadband networks out there, it basically means that over 75% of our CMTSs, our cable broadband footprint, have been upgraded to support IPv6. We're on target to basically make that 100% and keep it there, probably in the next quarter. And I think it's important for folks to know that the bulk of that in recent years has been done through software upgrades. So years ago, when DOCSIS 3.0 was created, Comcast and many other cable operators, there was a pretty big push for us to get to a fully DOCSIS 3.0 cable footprint. That's where we really had to invest in hardware to make, for speeds and to get to DOCSIS 3.0. I shamelessly will tell you that I rode the coattails of our DOCSIS 3.0 hardware upgrades and simply help make the software work so that we can have a successful V6 deployment. But I do want to reinforce that the bulk of this work that we're doing right now is largely software upgrades. I don't mean to trivialize it because it is a lot of work. We have several thousand CMTSs across our broadband network, so by no means is it trivial to kind of reload them all, interrupt customers, and coordinate things in a way that is non-impactful to the customers. But it's certainly better than having to swap chassis and other sorts of line cards. So the bulk of our deployment, So anybody who's been watching the graphs, and you'll see a snapshot up here in a few minutes, before July 26th of last year, we had a pretty steady run rate as far as growth was concerned around our v6 adoption. On July 26th, which I believe was almost smack dab before the IETF in Berlin, we launched our first e-router, our integrated cable modem and e-router combination with v6 support. And the graph you'll see here in a few minutes is basically the results or the fruit of that labor. For the devices that we manage on behalf of our customers, we actually had the ability to push, again, remote software upgrades as well as configurations to enable IPv6 for our customers. One of the things that we all talked about as part of our World v6 launch planning, which at this stage of the game is a couple years ago, is from a broadband perspective, we wanted to make it so that broadband customers did not have to request IPv6. For those of us who run large broadband networks, we all know that the bulk of our customers have absolutely no idea what IPv6 is. I'll go out on a limb and say they probably don't know what v4 is either, and that's not a bad thing. We don't necessarily need 20 million people to know the ins and outs of how the internet works. Wouldn't be a bad thing, but we certainly don't want to make it a requirement. So one of the things that we did as part of our planning, and much of this planning has been in the works for 4 or 5 years or more, is to make it so that we can remotely push software updates, remotely enable IPv6, so that we don't ever have to make the customer care about v6 or even ask for it. And you'll see that that's basically paid for itself in just a few short months. We still estimate that about 5% of our active v6 usage is retail devices, or are retail devices. Things like Apple Airports, D-Links, Linksys, devices you can find in whatever the popular electronics store here is in the UK. At home, it would be Best Buy or Walmart. The remaining are devices that we have provided to our customers, that we have worked with our vendors on to kind of design and implement the software, and it's really yielding significant results for us. One of the biggest things that was reinforced to me, and this goes back almost as old as the program, is our executive said, hey John, you can deploy v6, just don't break anything. And the customers really shouldn't know about it. I said, yes sir, no problem sir, we'll take care of that, no problem. So all along the way we have been super sensitive to the seamlessness or the seamless nature of our deployment of v6. We do things like push out and pre-state configurations and let devices reset naturally, right? So I don't know how many of you do this, but basically folks, in our broadband network, some of them turn off their Wi-Fi router every night. Sometimes we get the benefit of a large hurricane that comes through, the Mid-Atlantic region, and lots of people lose power, and they all come back online. And we leverage those things that that many people wouldn't think to take advantage of, to make it so that when those devices come back online, we see a significant surge in kind of the downloading of new software and the downloading of new configuration. So we've been very focused on the seamless nature of our deployment for v6, to the point where we've built an entire very robust measurement and monitoring infrastructure to make sure that if we see trouble on the internet over v6 regionally, we want to know about it before our customers do. So as far as 2014 is concerned, we have a lot more in store. Not only do we have a large population of residential devices on tap to be deployed with v6 support, but we also have our commercial trials, which will soon conclude, and we will launch v6 for basically our entire broadband portfolio of services. So this is basically people, we're going to be covering people who are not only typical res users, like my wife and my children, my neighbors, but also people who run businesses out of their homes or small offices. So the point to reinforce here is we've made significant progress with our deployment in 2013, and we don't have any plans of to kind of take our foot off the gas pedal anytime soon. Our goal is to really see as close to 100% penetration for usage, sometime next year. That's really our intention, and we'll talk about the reasons for that in a few minutes. Just as a side note, years ago when we first started our trial activity and even some of the initial launch activity, Metri, which is basically our fiber kind of high-end service. That was by far one of the easiest services for us to enable for V6, and that's really been ready for years now. So this graph is something that we're all pretty proud of at work. A lot of people at Comcast really kind of pitch in on a daily basis and have been doing so over the past year or more to kind of make that magic happen. So we're quite proud of that. So let's talk about deploying V6, and let's talk about what it really means, right? So from our point of view, when you're at almost zero, every step forward, is in hundreds or multiples of something, right? So since we all started kind of doing this, and we've been doing this for a lot longer than 2011, but when V6 became popular, we've been obviously watching our traffic for a lot longer. We noticed that traffic increased significantly beginning in 2011, pre-World World V6 Day, and then of course as part of World V6 launch. On our network, we've seen that traffic increase 500%. So one of the last talks I did last year, I was a little depressed, to be honest with you. I thought to myself, wow, we're kind of around, at that point we were around 20-some%, and we had about 3% of our traffic was over V6. From July of last year until now, to date, we're seeing that to be something over 5%. So we are seeing the needle move, and for those of you who kind of wake up and have your morning coffee over the Google statistics, Mark Townsend, I'm talking to you, you'll notice that the needle is moving, right? We are seeing significant increase in the actual use of V6, but it's not enough. We really do need to see more, and one of the big things that we have on tap for this year is to really help make that push so that we can get to eventually at least 51% of internet-facing traffic being IPv6. So what does that really mean? So one of the things that we've been thinking about internally is, well, before World V6 launch, broadband providers were asked, hey, turn on V6 by default for your customers. So we did, and we're kind of now thinking, well, maybe for CDNs and hosting companies, it seems like a reasonable next step for folks in that space to turn on V6 by default for all of their customers instead of the ones who just asked for it. We had to ask for it from our CDN, right? Unfortunately, we host our own, the bulk of our own stuff, but our CDN, we actually had to ask for it. Our feeling right now is if you didn't have to ask for it and it was just there, we know that the water's warm and it's safe to come in and it's nice to come in. So we'd like to see that happen in 2014. So what else? So this is kind of like one of my boring slides. Leading up to World V6 launch, we did a bunch of other work. It all seems somewhat humdrum at this point. Enabling Comcast.net, Comcast6.net, our own CDN, all of our own bits. And truth be told, while it is important to us as a company, as important to us as part of our transition, let's face it, it's not the most popular content on the internet. But needless to say, it has to be done, and what we are seeing is again, more fruit from that labor. As people watch Xfinity TV from their tablet, from their PCs, we're seeing them consume that content over IPv6, which is a step in the right direction, which is what ultimately we need to see more of. And after the day is done, there's a whole facet of the V6 program at Comcast that would truly be, probably quite boring for most folks, but we extensively use IPv6 throughout the entire Comcast network to help manage the infrastructure. With a network this large and V4 addresses not increasing in supply, we have no choice. So why are we doing all this, right? Well, V4 addresses are going and soon to be gone. From our point of view, when we look back almost 10 years and we say to ourselves, well, do we want to manage islands of E4 or one logical IP network where everything is reachable? I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And ultimately for us, one of the main reasons why we've enabled V6 on the broadband side is we want to avoid transition technologies. The idea of deploying carrier-grade nets for a network where we have 20 million broadband users, it's pretty scary. So what else? What are some of the more obvious reasons here? Again, we want to quickly and as soon as humanly possible divorce ourselves from the constraints of V4, right? Which potentially includes in the future some of the costs that come with trying to support V4 for an extended period of time. Ongoing IP resource management goes without saying, but here's the part that I think we're going to start hearing more about, in the industry over the next year or two, is we view IPv6 as really a foundational component for the things that we want to do in the future. It's basically a foundation for innovation for us, right? Everything that we're doing, whether it's voice or video or IP in the home, IPv6 is central, right? Because everywhere we turn, and I have to tell you, as successful as we've been on the V6 front, I still come across folks internally within the company that want to do some really weird things when it comes to V4. And then you kind of want to tap them on the shoulder and say, do you know that if you did this with V6, it would be about 1,000 times simpler? So our view right now is we're moving out of a tactical play for V6. I think I've shown you, and I certainly can talk to you more about it, how we've leveraged V6 to help manage our business, manage growth. And I think it is important for folks to know, our network continues to grow. We've had people actually come and switch providers to come to Comcast because of the work they're doing on V6 front. Just like any other business, subscriber counts ebb and flow, but generally speaking, from our perspective, a lot of that happens on the video front, right? So for broadband, internet-based services, we continue to grow and grow healthily. So what else? What else is next? We continue to explore the benefits of V6. We see a lot of speed tests, for example, on our network on a daily basis. Anecdotally, we see that V6 outperforms V4 almost every single time. Seems pretty important to me. Seems that would be a very important attribute of V6 if we could zero in on around why that happens. And of course, there's operational benefits, but again, that's more tactical than anything else. So V6 support for all of our products and services. IP6 only broadband is something that we're looking at, right? Because at some point, we need to plan for the fact that V4 is going to be constrained. V6 only across the core network. I was told earlier, and I may have not been in the room for this, there was mention of segment routing. Also something that Comcast is looking at, as far as a lean core, V6 across the core of the network. We've invested heavily, throughout our infrastructure, and frankly, we want to take advantage of it. We want to leverage that technology, not only for the benefit of the company, but for the benefit of the services and ultimately our customers. Home automation, home networking. These are some areas where we are seeing some significant opportunities for us to leverage V6 to make significant improvements in how we deliver these services to our customers. And of course, we're getting a lot of pressure internally to leverage this next generation infrastructure to innovate, create new consumer-facing services that people want and would be more easily enabled using IPv6. So what else? So we are 25–30% active use now. That's, my estimation is and I'm sandbagging a little bit, we will increase that by 50% easily by the end of this year. If you look at the technologies listed here, packet cable 2.0, DSG 3.0, all cable technologies that we specified almost 10 years ago. These two in particular are what we will use to V6 enable both voice and video. DOCSIS 3.0 and eRouter, it's the cornerstone of that 30% that you see, and the double-digit growth that we'll see later this year. And again, the bulk of this work was done in 2005, 2006, 2007. But truth be told, it represents basic internet connectivity, right? So what's next, right? So from our point of view, we feel that there's a lot more to be had there. There's a lot more to be done. So in recent years, what we've done is we've done some work with, again, to kind of upgrade or refresh eRouter. We called that project HipNet. Past year or so, we've done a lot more work with the IETF and HomeNet, and essentially there's been a lot of effort done there to basically harmonize the two. In a cable broadband network, you'll find that this integrated device that we call an eRouter is basically a cable modem and a home router embedded with one another. Pretty unusual to separate the two. So from our perspective, in a cable home network, this device will typically reside at the edge of the home network. And the work that we've been doing as of late is to really harmonize and come up with creative ways where we can incrementally look at work that is happening in various working groups within the ITF, HomeNet, DNS service discovery. There's even some cleanup work that we're doing as it relates to V6 ops and harmonizing with the latest version of 6204 biz, which I forget the number of right now, the latest version. But again, significant efforts that are ongoing today that leverage the work that we've done in cable broadband networks that we feel are foundational. They're enablers for a lot of this work, right? And for those of you who are interested, and you'll hear more about this in a few minutes from Mark, there is a lot of activity in the HomeNet IETF working group. We have a design team that was formed last summer, and at this stage of the game, we're looking to really kind of move those needles forward later this year. So with this, I am magically on time, which is very rare for me. I'd like to close out. Thank you all for your time, and take the last few minutes to answer any questions. I will dodge rotten fruit that you throw at me.
Rob.
No. Go ahead, please.
Was the decision to deploy your own router based on frustration that you couldn't get decent CPU devices as kind of merchant devices?
No. The motivation for an e-router is kind of rooted in basically how we've done a lot of things throughout the years as part of running cable broadband networks. Naturally, they're like peas in a pod. They go together, right? Most people who have cable broadband, you can get a cable modem. Back in the day before cable operators built e-routers, that's when the home NATs and the Linksys of the world, were born, right? And these days, there's some additional functionality that we find in these e-routers. So today, not only is it a cable modem and a router put together, but usually there's a voice interface for it as well. So a lot of these things, a lot of retail devices, I won't call it frustration, but they simply don't have all the features that we need to support all the services that we want to have in them.
Okay, try Rob again.
There we go.
Hello, you can hear me now? Right. Well done. I'm thinking, when I've asked various vendors about, do you support IPv6 in your boxes, and yes, you can upgrade it and then it will now do IPv6, but they tend to be quite reluctant when I press them for any more detail on, okay, do you do this in hardware, or do you actually do it all in software? So if I have the same access list and the same features enabled on the boxes, is that IPv6 experience going to suck because it's all going through the CPU of the box and not in... And my experience is that they've been very reluctant to tell me, how does your load balancing algorithm work for IPv6? Oh, no, we can't tell you that. It's proprietary secret magic, which we cannot possibly tell you. And it's like, well, because I'm exposing the limits of where your box is going to break. So how do you have that relationship with vendors where they'll just be open with you and say, yes, it can do this, it can't do this, it's doing it in hardware?
We get new vendors.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, all kidding aside, yes, we have got new vendors in some cases, right? Particularly in the load balancing space, right? There was a great deal of frustration for us and some concern early on, but there are some vendors we simply cannot replace. So there's a couple different ways to go ahead and do that. You could become their new best friend for an extended period of time, which I'm like the last person that they want to be best friends with. And then basically you have to drive it through. What I've come to the conclusion is V6 means different things to different people. And sometimes what it means to some folks in the vendor community is not what I need for a production deployment of V6. So we've had to get up close and personal with implementations. We've had to, make sure that our refresh cycles. We've even been on, and knock on wood, fortunately, we've been on kind of the tail end of hardware refresh cycles, natural hardware refresh cycles, where we said, hey, wait a minute, We know that it does X, Y, and Z exactly as you describe, in kind of hardware version 1.0. But as we go down the path of version 2.0, there was a lot of planning. There was a lot of quite hard, difficult questions that had to be asked to make sure that we avoided those situations. Frankly, the one other thing that you can do is you can turn it on. Maybe not for everybody, not for wide scale, but once you turn it on, or you tell somebody you're going to turn it on, you're going to find out exactly how confident they are in their product. It's one way.
John, hi, Neil McRae from BT. Great presentation. Thanks for that. Probably a question less focused on IPv6, but kind of trying to compare the market that Comcast is in with the market here in the UK. And I'm kind of dropping you on this, apologies, but for a kind of triple play broadband voice TV, what's the average kind of price in the US from your point of view?
I don't know. I don't pay for it, but let me guess.
I do, and it's outrageous, but then I don't get Comcast as I'm not a Comcast customer, I'm the other lot.
So triple play, so voice, video, and data, maybe, for the customer, maybe $175
a month.
Yep. US.
And you're all complaining about our prices.
Hi.
Any other questions for John?
Bob Slayer, EE. Can you give us some idea when you're likely to have removed V4 from your network completely?
No, I can't. But what I can tell you is in this year, we will begin V6 only trials. And what I mean by V6 only means I won't offer V4 support. This is not the sort of trial where I'm going to say, hey, Keith, guess what? I just turned off V4 to your house. It won't be like that, right? They're going to be opt-in because essentially what we need to do is we need to really assess what the experience is going to be when V4 is turned off. Just like how we turn V6 on, we know that V4 will go away in a similar fashion, right? There will be some places where we will be able to disable V4 sooner than others. Broadband-facing connectivity is probably going to be one of the last.
Yeah, okay. And a kind of follow-up question. If you've 10 years of this experience with V6, if you were coming to this now, do you think you would still go dual stack, or would you be looking at V6 only?
I think starting the party now, I think you have many fewer choices now than you did 10 years ago, right? And that's part of the reason why, for the longest time, it was really me, right? The company kind of juggling all the chainsaws, right? And all things considered, it was a pretty good bet, from Comcast's point of view. It paid dividends significantly. So the answer to that question lies not only in the company, the size of the company, but where are you, right? Are you in RIPE, APNIC, the ARIN regions, what are your V4 supplies looking like, right? So many variables.
Thanks.
Surely.
Ralph Weber, Nominum. In one of your slides, you had basically experienced the benefits of V6, and one of the things was their better performance. Have you have any research or numbers backing that up that you are willing to share?
We are actively having I'm running a project right now where we're actually dissecting kind of the network. I don't have data that I'm willing to throw out on the table now, but if we do this again later this year, I will have data, maybe even during a future ITF. But
Thanks.
we're in hot pursuit, so stay tuned. Anyone
Okay,
else?
I think we need to move on to the next presenter now, but thank you very much,
Thanks
John.
all. Thank you.